Welcome to Life Stories, where we share tales of love, loss, and unexpected turns that life takes. Today's story is about Jack, a young billionaire who thought he had it all, until he realized his girlfriend only loved his wealth. What happens when he hires someone from a very different world to help him escape his toxic relationship? And how does this encounter change everything for him? Join us as we dive into a journey of self-discovery, love, and the power of second chances. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start the story today. It was a cold autumn evening in New York City, and the skyline glistened against the fading light of the day. Jack, a young billionaire, sat at his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, his mind racing. He'd been here before, sitting alone in his thoughts, trying to process the wreckage of a relationship that had been doomed from the start. Chloe, his girlfriend of nearly 2 years, was everything he thought he wanted: beautiful, charming, and utterly captivating. But over time, he began to realize something that crushed him. Chloe didn't love him, she loved his wealth. She was enamored with the lifestyle, the fancy dinners, the designer clothes, the private jets, and the lavish vacations. What she didn't care for was the person sitting right in front of her. At first, Jack had overlooked the signs. He had told himself that love would come eventually. He believed, as many do in the early stages of a relationship, that time would foster deeper affection. But slowly, it became impossible to ignore. Chloe never seemed interested in his day-to-day life, his dreams, or the man behind the wealth. She loved the attention, the gifts, and the glamorous lifestyle he provided. It was like he was just a means to an end, a tool to get the things she wanted. Jack didn't want to start a fight. He didn't want to confront her in a way that would end badly. He was a calm and composed man by nature, but the situation was weighing heavily on his heart. He needed a way out, but he knew Chloe wouldn't leave on her own. That's when the idea came to him. It wasn't pretty, but it was clever. He needed someone who could make Chloe see that he was no longer her source of luxury and entertainment. He needed someone bold, someone who wouldn't back down, someone who would make Chloe uncomfortable enough to walk away. That's when he thought of Sarah. Sarah was a mechanic from Brooklyn, far removed from the world Jack inhabited. She was the opposite of everything Chloe represented. Where Chloe wore designer dresses and carried herself with the grace of a socialite, Sarah wore faded jeans and worked tirelessly in a small, grimy garage. She wasn't concerned with appearances. She spoke her mind without hesitation. And she wasn't afraid to challenge anyone. Jack knew, from the moment he met her, that Sarah was different. She was raw, unpolished, and real. He contacted her, explaining his plan. "I need you to pretend to be my partner," Jack said, his voice steady. "We'll make Chloe think I'm with you, and she'll walk away. I'll pay you handsomely for your help." Sarah laughed on the other end of the phone, her deep voice full of disbelief. "You must be out of your mind, Jack. But, I'll admit, I could use the money. Let's do it." The next day, Jack arranged a dinner at his penthouse. Chloe, as usual, was delighted by the idea of another night of luxury. But when she walked in and saw Sarah, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, her expression shifted. Sarah wasn't the mechanic she expected. She looked every bit as polished and poised as the women Jack usually surrounded himself with, though there was a sharp edge to her presence that intrigued Jack. "Who's this?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with confusion as she stopped in her tracks. Jack smiled, trying to mask the anxiety that had been building in him all day. "Chloe, this is Sarah, my partner." "Partner?" Chloe raised an eyebrow, clearly unsure of what Jack meant. "Business partner?" "No," Jack replied, keeping his tone casual. "More like love." Chloe's jaw dropped. Her confusion was palpable. Sarah, without missing a beat, leaned in closer to Jack, placing her arm around his chair with a playful wink. "Sorry, sweetheart," she said, her voice teasing. Jack's taken. Chloe's face turned bright red. "You're leaving me for her?" she sputtered, her words thick with anger and disbelief. Sarah just smiled, reclining in her chair. "Sorry, but Jack understands me. It's not a joke." Chloe, it's real. Chloe stormed out of the penthouse, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floors. The sound echoed in Jack's ears, and for the first time in months, he felt a sense of freedom. He was finally rid of the weight that Chloe had placed on him. It had been a long time coming, and yet, he still felt guilty. That went better than I expected, Sarah said, her laughter filling the room. She looked like she wanted to punch me. Jack chuckled, feeling a sense of relief. You were amazing, he said, his voice softening. I couldn't have done it without you. As the days went by, Jack began to notice something strange. It wasn't just that Sarah had helped him out of a tight spot, she was also fun to be around. She made him laugh in ways no one else had. And she was refreshingly honest. She didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. She told him the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt alive, but he couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest. Something was shifting, and he wasn't sure what to make of it. He had hired Sarah to solve a problem, but now he was starting to see her as more than just a solution. There was something about her that called to him. He had started to feel something deeper, something unexpected. And the more he was around her, the more he realized he didn't want to let go. It wasn't long before Jack found himself facing a new problem, his feelings for Sarah. Days passed, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between him and Sarah. What had started as a simple favor had evolved into something more. Sarah was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was unapologetically herself, with no pretense, no desire for riches or glamour. Her words were sharp, her opinions strong, and yet there was a kindness in her that Jack couldn't ignore. It was as though she had this quiet strength that made him feel seen in a way that Chloe never had. But as Jack grew more fond of Sarah, she seemed to distance herself. She remained friendly, yes, but there was an invisible wall between them. Sarah was always quick to dismiss any suggestion of romance or even a deeper connection. I'm not the kind of person who gets caught up in emotions, Jack, she had said one night when they were talking over drinks on his balcony. I don't need anyone to save me. And I don't need anyone to change my life. I'm just here to help. At first, Jack thought it was just a matter of time before Sarah would see the truth about their bond. But then something happened that neither of them could have predicted. One day, Sarah came to him, looking distant and pale, her usual sharp energy dulled. Jack, I need to talk to you, she said quietly. Something's happening, something I wasn't prepared for. Her words hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. Jack's heart skipped a beat, wondering what could be troubling her. What's wrong? He asked, his voice soft with concern. I'm pregnant, Sarah replied, her eyes meeting his for the first time in what felt like forever. With twins. The words struck Jack like a thunderclap. Pregnant? With twins? It was as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. Sarah, the woman who had spent years building her life in the harsh reality of Brooklyn's mechanic shop, was now carrying two lives inside her. For a moment, Jack didn't know what to say. The news was overwhelming. He had been so caught up in his own emotions, his growing feelings for Sarah, that he hadn't stopped to think about the consequences of what they'd done. Sarah, are you okay? He asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. What are you going to do? Sarah shook her head, her hands trembling. I don't know, Jack. I don't know if I can do this. I don't have anyone to help me. I don't even know how to raise these babies. I don't have a family. I don't have a support system. Jack's heart ached for her. He could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't asking for a handout, she was simply trying to survive. To navigate a world that had never been kind to her. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. He had everything she could possibly want in terms of material wealth. But he couldn't fix this for her. This was something much deeper than money could solve. I'll be here for you, Sarah, Jack said quietly. I'll help you in any way I can. You're not alone in this. But Sarah shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't want your pity, Jack. I don't want your charity. I'm not like those women who think a rich man can solve all their problems. I'm just a mechanic, and I've made my life on my own. I don't need anyone to rescue me." Jack didn't know what to say to that. He respected her strength, but he also knew that she needed help, whether she wanted to admit it or not. The days that followed were filled with silence and tension. Sarah withdrew into herself, refusing Jack's offers of support. She tried to carry on with her life as if nothing had changed. But Jack could see the weight of the situation pressing down on her. One day, after a particularly difficult conversation, Sarah disappeared without a word. She simply left, leaving Jack alone in his penthouse, the emptiness of her absence settling in around him like a dark cloud. He tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. His heart ached with the thought that she might be avoiding him, that she might be pushing him away because of his wealth, his world, everything she had once told him she didn't want. For days, Jack couldn't focus on anything. He couldn't work, he couldn't eat, and all he could think about was Sarah. Where had she gone? What was she going through? He needed to see her, to talk to her, to help her. He knew she was strong, but this was too much for anyone to carry alone. Jack's search led him to a small mechanic shop in Brooklyn, the place where Sarah had worked before all this. He didn't know what he was hoping for, but he couldn't stay at home, waiting for her to come back. When he arrived at the shop, one of Sarah's co-workers was there, his hands covered in grease as he worked on an engine. "Have you seen Sarah?" Jack asked, his voice tight with worry. The man looked up at him with a frown. "She doesn't work here anymore," he said. "She packed up and left a few days ago. Said she needed a fresh start." Jack's heart sank. He had no idea where Sarah had gone, and the fact that she had left without a trace made everything feel even more uncertain. He didn't know what to do next. He couldn't lose her, not after everything that had happened. He needed to find her, to understand why she had pushed him away. But as the days turned into weeks, Jack began to realize something. Sarah wasn't just avoiding him, she was running from something much deeper. The question was, could he help her face it? The weeks dragged on, and Jack found himself consumed by thoughts of Sarah. He had tried to reach out to her repeatedly, but each time his calls went unanswered, and her apartment seemed empty when he stopped by. He even drove to her old mechanic shop in Brooklyn, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. But the place felt abandoned, and the employees there spoke little of her departure. It was as if she had disappeared from his life entirely, leaving behind nothing but the haunting memory of her laughter, her straightforwardness, and her unwillingness to accept anything less than the truth. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that she was pushing him away because she thought he couldn't understand her life, that he was too far removed from her world. She didn't want to be part of his high society world, the world of wealth, status, and luxury. He knew she had her pride, her walls built high from a life of struggle and independence. But what troubled him most was the possibility that she was running from something far more painful than just the idea of being with a rich man. He didn't understand what she was hiding, but he knew that whatever it was keeping her at a distance. Meanwhile, Chloe, Jack's ex-girlfriend, had not been content to let go of him. Even after the dramatic scene at Jack's penthouse, where she had stormed out in a huff, she refused to accept that their relationship was over. She kept calling Jack, sending messages, and even showing up at his office, trying to manipulate him into giving her another chance. But Jack had seen through her for good now. He had been blinded by her beauty and charm for so long. But once the truth had come to light, once he had seen how much she cared for his money and not for him, there was no going back. Chloe was a chapter he had closed, and he knew that reopening it would only bring more heartache. Chloe, however, was not a woman to be dismissed so easily. In the months that followed, her jealousy and pride festered into something darker. She was consumed with the idea of losing Jack to Sarah, a woman she deemed beneath her. Sarah's simplicity, her honesty, her lack of pretense, everything that made Sarah genuine was exactly what Chloe could never understand. And so, her anger only grew, reaching a boiling point where she decided to take matters into her own hands. It started with whispers in the corners of high society circles, where Chloe spread rumors about Jack's newfound relationship. She painted Sarah as a gold digger, a schemer who had manipulated Jack into falling for her. But it wasn't enough to simply talk. Chloe needed to do something more. Her jealousy clouded her judgment, and she began to plot. One day, Chloe went to meet a man she had heard about through a friend, a man who was known for taking care of problems when people couldn't handle them themselves. His reputation was less than savory, but Chloe didn't care. She was blinded by rage and her need for revenge. She was determined to make Sarah's life miserable and show Jack that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. She met the man in a rundown building on the outskirts of town. He was smoking a cigarette, sitting on a pile of bricks. Chloe handed him a picture of Sarah, her face contorted in anger. "I need you to take care of her," Chloe said, her voice low and menacing. "Make sure she's gone. Do whatever it takes." The man studied the photo for a long time, his face impassive. Finally, he looked up at Chloe. "I know her," he said, shaking his head. "I can't do this." "What do you mean, you can't?" Chloe spat, frustration building inside her. "I'll pay you whatever you want. Just make her disappear." The man stood up, his tone firm. "I don't harm people who've shown me kindness. She helped me once. Didn't even charge me for fixing my car. I can't do what you're asking." Chloe's temper flared. "You'll regret this. I'll double whatever you're being paid. Just do it." But the man refused. "I don't care how much you offer. I won't harm her." Defeated and furious, Chloe stormed out, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She couldn't accept that Jack had chosen Sarah. She couldn't bear the thought of him being with someone she considered so unworthy. But in her attempt to control the situation, she lost herself. Her bitterness consumed her, and her rage turned into something far more dangerous. As Chloe stormed out of the building, her mind filled with thoughts of revenge. She didn't notice how close she was to the edge of the road. In her blind fury, she stepped into the path of an oncoming car. The driver honked desperately, but it was too late. The car struck her, sending her flying onto the pavement. When Chloe opened her eyes, she found herself in a hospital bed, her body heavy and unresponsive. The doctor's voice was calm, but the words felt like a heavy blow. "You've been in an accident," he explained, his eyes filled with sympathy. "You've suffered serious injuries, and I'm afraid your spinal cord was damaged. You won't be able to walk again." Chloe's world crumbled. All of the anger, all of the hatred that she had clung to for so long, suddenly seemed so meaningless. She had spent her life trying to control others, trying to manipulate Jack, but now she was powerless. As the reality of her situation set in, the bitterness that had consumed her for so long turned into regret. She had ruined her life, all for the sake of jealousy. Meanwhile, Sarah's life was taking an unexpected turn. The twins she was carrying had become the center of her life. And Jack, despite the walls Sarah had built around herself, had proven to be a constant source of support. But Jack had made a decision. He would not let Sarah push him away again. He was ready to fight for her, and for the future they could build together. Even as Chloe's world collapsed, Jack's new life with Sarah was beginning to take shape. As the months passed, Sarah's life slowly began to settle. The twins, Noah and Nathan, became her world, and Jack was by her side every step of the way. What had started as a complicated, unexpected turn of events had blossomed into a love that neither of them had anticipated. Jack was no longer the billionaire with a life of luxury to offer. He was a man deeply in love with a woman who had shown him what true love meant, without the distractions of wealth or status. Together, they built a life based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. Chloe, on the other hand, found herself alone, trapped in the bitterness of her own making. After the accident, she had to come to terms with the reality of her new life. The anger she had once held toward Sarah seemed meaningless now, replaced by regret and sorrow. She had destroyed everything for the sake of jealousy. And now, she had to learn to live with the consequences. In a small, intimate ceremony in Los Angeles, Jack and Sarah got married. Surrounded by close friends and family, they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's challenges. Margaret, Jack's mother, was there, holding one of the twins on her lap. Tears of joy in her eyes as she watched her son marry the woman who had changed his life forever. The twins giggled and clapped, bringing light to the day. And for the first time, Jack felt like he had everything he needed. Their story was a testament to love, second chances, and the idea that sometimes life takes us on unexpected paths to find true happiness. Thank you for joining us for this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with more heartwarming life stories.